Well, hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the Amazing Seller Podcast. And today we've got something a little bit different that we're going to do, because if you listen to episode 728, the big reveal, well, you're going to want to stay tuned for this one if you're at all interested at how this project even came about, why I wanted to do it, and really some of those questions that I've been asked as far as why I would even want to go down this road. So I've invited on a good friend of mine, Mr. Chris Schaefer, who has been at Brand Accelerator Live, because the time that we're recording this, Chris, it's after Brand Accelerator Live. Isn't that crazy that this is airing after we've been at Brand Accelerator Live?
I know, dude. My presentation was fantastic.
It was.
If you weren't there, you missed out. You know, I mean, that's just how it rolls.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah. No, you did really, really good, and everything went really well. And I know it's
nothing caught on fire. There were no issues. Everything flowed smoothly. It was great.
Yeah, no, it was awesome. No, I love recording this into the future that we haven't even arrived there yet, but everything has kind of been mapped out, including, you know, the big reveal that I did on Monday, but I actually did it at Brand Accelerator Live. And hopefully, if you listened to episode 728, you heard the recording of that reveal. And hopefully it did record and you did listen to that. So episode 728 is where you will find that. And that there was titled Scott's Big Reveal, Project Take Action Effect. So Chris, what do you want to know? What do you want to know about this project?
So the thing that's kind of in my mind that I think is on a lot of people's mind, Scott, is why write a book to begin with? And is this like an Amazon book, right? If they don't already have their hands on it, like what's the story behind it? What led you to want to do it, and what's it all about?
Well, you know, it's like anything that I've ever done in the past. I was led here. Right. Like I was led here, and at Brand Accelerator Live, I went through in my presentation and I went through the timeline. I went through exactly how I arrived at this point. Like I'd say 15 months ago, I had no idea that I would be writing a book. Like I didn't even think that it would be in my future within the next 3 years. Now I wanted to, just because I wanted to be able to put something out there in the world that could be on people's, counters, or that could be on their coffee table, and something that would be there where people can actually read through versus just being digital. So there's something about that I just wanted to be in people's homes, not just on their devices. And so that was one thing for me, but I never thought that it would be possible because, well, a lot of you know my background. I never went to college. I had self-limiting beliefs and doubts and all of that stuff. So to me, writing a book, that meant it was kind of like schoolwork. Like I'm not going to be able to do that. I wasn't good at that. How am I going to do that? And then I started to ask myself, Scott, what do you really want to do in the next 3 to 5 years? Do you want to be doing podcasting? Do you want to be talking about e-commerce only? Do you want to be talking about Amazon? Like, what is it that lights you up? And I think we all get to this place. And that's part of what the book is about, is like, just because you've worked maybe at a job or you've climbed yourself up the ladder, or maybe you've built a business, it doesn't mean that's where you have to end up. So to answer your question, Chris, is I wanted to write it because it was something inside me telling me that I needed to do more versus just really talking about one specific thing. So that's like the real driver for me.
Well, I think the other portion of this is, and this is not like an Amazon book. This is not an e-commerce book, right? Like this is a book that gives you the blueprint on how to do what it is you want to do. And yes, like, because that is your background now, right? You have a lot of experience in the Amazon world. You have a lot of experience in the e-commerce world. You view the world kind of through that lens. And a lot of the things you talk about relate back to those things. But one of the things that's funny to me, and I was having this conversation with somebody the other day, is like, you can sit here and say all of these things. You could sit here and read the book on the podcast, right? Mm-hmm. And actually, I just realized there's not an audio version of this.
Well, there will be. There will be. It's not there yet, but there will be. We're working on that.
I was concerned.
Yeah.
But you can say the same exact things. And it's funny because even if you have let's say you do have the audio version of the book, mm-hmm. people perceive that message differently mm-hmm. when it's written on a piece of paper. Mm-hmm. And that's not to say that it's better or worse than a podcast. I don't think it is. The information is the information, mm-hmm. right? And the presentation of the information could be identical, but in the medium of a physical book, for whatever reason, when you sit down to actually take the time to read something, it sinks in a lot more.
Mhm.
And, you know, people make fun of me all the time, Scott, because technically I'm a millennial, right? And I'm a tech nerd of a millennial. But the only way a lot of times that I can learn something and really like take it to heart is by sitting there and taking notes while I learn about it,
Mm.
right? Physically taking notes and then reading those on paper notes later. And I think the same thing kind of applies to the book, right? Like you've said a lot of the things that are in the book, probably 100 times, right? What's the title of the book?
The Take Action Effect.
Right. How many times have you said take action?
A lot.
Well, what's the episode number on this podcast?
Yeah.
At least that many times.
Right.
Right. But even having said that, even knowing that the people who are listening to this right now know that, there's something different about having it in their hand and actually reading and being able to implement. And something that you've always done extraordinarily well is being able to chunk information down for people. And I think all of the ideas that you wanted to express in the book, books give that a very, very specific format, right? And they do that very well. I can read a chapter, understand it, close the book, put it down, think about it, and come back. I can't really do that with a podcast.
Mm-hmm.
I can't really do that with a video. I can't really do that with any of those kinds of things. And so I think that was especially on your mind because you wanted people to readily be able to understand and to implement, take action on the stuff that you're talking about in the book, correct?
It's exactly what it is. But here's what I want to make very clear, okay, is this is not a one thing specific book. Like it's not like, okay, this is going to be how you launch a product on Amazon, right? Like that would be a book that I would create for that one purpose. And that would be something that I would create. And then I would have, like it created as a resource. And then you could, give me your email address for it. We call that a lead magnet. Like that's what that would be. This here, I wanted to be evergreen. So this here to me is the stories that I've went through and that I've learned. And I'm talking all the way from the mindset piece. A lot of it is mindset in the first part of the book because it's uncovering yourself and your superpowers and really these moments that I've experienced that I still experience. Like this, writing this book was a moment, right, that I decided to do it and go for it. The Brand Accelerator Live is something that I was, not sure I wanted to do. And then I'm doing it because, I want the outcome, and the outcome isn't financial. If you're writing a book, let me just tell you this. If you're writing a book, the money's not in the book sales. Okay. I'm just to be totally upfront with everyone. The what I'm doing there in that book is I'm building a relationship and I'm letting people into my world and my teachings and my mindset and all of that so we can build a deeper relationship, a deeper connection. So for me, I wanted to get out of the light of just being Amazon and e-commerce, even though there's a good portion in there that talks about e-commerce because that's one way to monetize your business. But it's really about how to really figure out what it is that you want to do and then build a brand around that and future-proof yourself. That's really what it's about. But the take action effect is those moments that you act on that change your life forever. And there's so many that I can trace back that, there's one action that was taken that created this ripple effect because I did it. I mean, the book is going to create a ripple effect for me in new directions. It's going to open up new audiences, new stages for me to speak on. My goal in the next 3 to 5 years is to be able to go out there and spread that word or that word to spread the message to the world as far as what I believe in, as far as building a business that supports your lifestyle. Not about getting the Lamborghinis, not about getting the yachts. That's not my message. My message is if you're living right now in a world of like frustration because you're trapped in a sense, or you're chained to your desk, you don't have to be. And I'm living proof of that. So that's my little rant on that, Chris. That's the big vision for me as to why I wanted to write this book.
Well, so you weren't necessarily chained to a desk. You were chained to a chain link fence on a construction site.
Pretty much.
But
yeah.
Wherever you're chained up,
yeah.
Right? And you touched on something there, Scott. You said, I wanted to write a book, and a lot of the people listening have probably read one of your other books, right? Like Ecom Business Formula or anything. I mean, there's a handful of other ones that we've put out through the lens of TAS.
Yeah.
But I think what a lot of people miss out on is this is a different thing. Right? What you talked about, Scott, you talked about like, okay, we've done lead magnets and some of those kinds of things in the past. Those are tactics, right? Those are like here's the thing that you can do right now to do this. And there is some of that in this book, because obviously, if you're talking about the things you can do to achieve your dreams and the things that you need to do, the action steps that you need to take, all of those things, we do have to give you an outlet, right? So you present them with some of those things, but the vast majority of this is strategy, which is a big shift for you. It's a strategy on how to approach these different areas of your life and how to realize when you are having a moment that's a take action moment.
Yes.
Even if it's in hindsight, and how to actually view where that is taking you. This book, at least to me, and correct me if you feel differently on this, is a shift from the in your business to on your business mindset, which is something we've talked about on the podcast in the past. A lot of business owners get stuck working in the business. That's the tactical stuff. How do I launch a product on Amazon? How do I run AdWords ads for e-commerce? Those are tactics, right? Good business owners, just like good people, don't focus on the how do I cook the best salmon fillet thing, right? They focus on the what's the best diet I can have to optimize my performance. That's the strategy level. And that's really what you're talking about in this book. It's the roadmap, but it's not the like, okay, you need to do this and this and this inside of the Amazon ecosystem to do it. It's figure out what it is that you actually want, and then we can give you the blueprint to do that. Is that correct?
It's exactly it. And it was funny, like when I was going through this process, which I had a book coach, actually, I hired a book coach to actually help me write this book. And we spent a lot of time together over the past 13 months to actually allow this to come to be. And, she actually, the time of this recording, she had already been there, but I invited her to come to Brand Accelerator Live to come up on stage with me and really just give her thanks in front of everyone publicly, because without her, I don't believe I could have did this by myself. Because writing a book is not, I'm talking about like writing a literal book, like not like just putting together an ebook. I'm saying like, this is a book that I want to live on for a long time. I want my kids to be able to see it and to enjoy it and to hand it down. And I want them to know the stories that it took to get to where I am, and to always believe in yourself. Like I was a kid that was, right out of high school, and, all my friends were going to college. Scott didn't go to college. I wasn't brought up that way. My father was like, you learn a trade. And then, so I learned that business, and I thought I was going to own that business one day. And then, things happened, and partnerships, failed, and it was like a bad marriage. And from there, I lost my mother, which also woke me up to say, holy crap, life is too short. And I had 2 young kids. So I needed to make a shift. And that's really, to me, like going through those stories, it allows me to see how far I've come, but also to let other people know how far they've actually come. So like, if you're listening to this right now, whether you read the book or not, I want you to think about like things that you've done already, that you've accomplished, that you're not giving yourself credit for, because there's so many things that you've done already that you should be proud of. Right? Like I still wasn't proud of myself, even though I went out and built a business with my father that we built into a $2 million business, brick and mortar, back 18 years ago, which back then was, a local business. It's not that easy to do. And, I was a huge part of that growth, but didn't give myself credit, because I didn't feel I had that education. So I'm just I was just a construction worker. What good am I? I learned a ton. So through everything, there's that mindset piece. And that's why in the very first part of the book, like the first half of the book really is we go through and we more or less retrain your thinking in your brain and giving yourself confidence. Cause Chris, this, like if you go to the foul line and you're playing basketball, you need to have confidence you're going to make that shot every single time, even though you might not. Right. So every time that you have a new thing come into your business or into your life, or you're feeling a shift or whatever, you need to have confidence in that decision, and also ways to think about how to create safety nets for yourself. And one for me, when I was in the construction business, was, well, you know what, if this photography thing doesn't work, I'll just go back and do what I was doing before. I still got that skill set. I learned it. I can still do it. I might not want to, but I can. So yes, this book is, it is how to build a future-proof business, but a lot of it has to do with the mindset piece. And then from there, identifying what you are supposed to do next, act on it, how to get yourself to feel confident about acting on it, but also reducing the risk by some of those other skill sets that you've already built. And that's what it is. And then from there, we take it into the second part of the book, where we go through and actually build out your business or improve the business. So if you have an Amazon business right now, and it says this in the book, You need to apply everything that we're talking about in the book, because in the book, we're talking about building a brand, which has a lot to do with serving a market. Like I've talked about so many times, like that stuff doesn't change ever. So that's really what I want, again, for people to understand, is it's not just, like you said, Chris, tactics, some strategy, yes, but it's really getting clear, crystal clear on your vision of where you want to go and not being swayed by what others think that you should do or what you think that you have to do.
One thing I think I want people to take away from everything you just rattled off there, Scott, and there was a lot
There's
there.
a lot,
It was all
right?
good.
I get fired up.
The book is called The Take Action Effect, right? And the subtitle, the official subtitle, is Proven Steps to Build a Future-Proof Brand and Create Your Ultimate Freedom. And the only reason that it doesn't cover the rest of that is because there's only so much room on a physical print page, right?
Exactly.
We can't say proven steps to create a future-proof business, pull your head out of your butt and create your ultimate freedom, right? But realistically,
right.
There's a good portion of this that's dedicated to the middle portion of that, which is pulling your head out of your butt, right? And the way that you phrased that was a little more polite, which was, finding the skills you didn't know you have, and giving yourself credit for the things that you're not realizing. And that's one of the things I think that I took away, even in reading some of the early drafts of this, is that, we all get bogged down and we all get tunnel vision and we forget the stuff that we know or the safety nets, quote unquote, that we have in place that might actually not just be a safety net, but might be an asset in this business, right? Like you did a lot of systemization in the construction world. You can apply a lot of those same skills to business,
absolutely,
right? To generic business, to insert whatever business you want to do. And you can carry over a lot of those skills, but we have to pull ourselves out and look at the 5,000 foot view. And this book does a great job of that. Now, you mentioned something, Scott, that I wanted to touch on, because if anybody listening has heard you talk in the past, one of the reasons you started a podcast in the first place is because you hate typing. So you mentioned quickly that you got a book coach.
Yeah.
Why did you choose to go that route? And what was that experience like, having somebody that's done this before kind of guiding you through the process?
That's a great question. And the way it worked, and I'll be totally honest with everyone, and a lot of writers do it this way. Gary Vaynerchuk has done it this way, I think, for all of his books, is where you get a coach that really asks questions. And then you go through like hours upon hours of them interviewing you and going through all the stories. And you're going to repeat those stories, but you're going to add things, because every time you tell a story, something else pops up. Oh, I remember that, right? And you go through all of these stories. So for me, I needed someone to guide me through, because I can sit there and tell you my entire story, right? But to then turn it into lessons, turn it into a theme, like having take action moments, and then turning that into the take action effect, which, by the way, at first I didn't know what the book was going to be called. I just knew what I wanted to share, to inspire, to motivate, but then also to give a process and a system that I followed to build a brand. And so I didn't know what the book was going to be called. And at first I was kind of like, take action. I wasn't even effective. It was just like take action something. And then I was talking to, I think it was you and maybe even Joel. And I know our good friend, Jimmy, he had said, dude, it's gotta be something take action. It has to be. I mean, that's what you are like. And again, that self-doubt came in my head a little bit, like, but okay, so yes, a lot of people come to me and they say, Scott, I listen to your podcast because of the energy, because of you constantly telling me to take action, and that motivates me and makes me want to do it. And so I'm like, but yeah, I'm not Tony Robbins, right? Like, I'm not that guy. But again, even though I'm where I am in my career and in my life, you still have these things. And then all of a sudden, the pieces started to line up when I was going through this with my coach. I'm like, well, wait a minute here. I'm doing all of these like take action moments, and I'm identifying them in the book. So there's these little spots there that say like take action moment. This is one of them. Because of this is what happened. And then from there, that led me to here. And then this is what happened. And so it kind of does that, right? And so it all started to make sense. I'm like, well, wait a minute. There's these moments that we take that create this ripple effect. So why don't we call it the take action effect? Wow, that's amazing. So then it's like, yes, I'm excited about it. But again, this was through a process of working with a coach that made me feel in the beginning, listen, don't worry about writing anything right now. All I want you to do is I want you to meet with me for 2 hours. for the next, I think it was like 12 weeks. And we're just going to just go through your life and I mean, obviously, what do you want the end result to be? And the end result for me was I want people that feel either stuck or they feel like they can't achieve something because they don't have the know-how or they don't have the resources or whatever. I want that person to get out of their own way, and I want them to step up and do something, whether it's earning your first dollar or whether it's creating your first blog post because you have an Amazon business, but you're not doing content and you're not building an email list. Like I want that person to get out of their own way and start building these different skill sets that will allow them to continually use them way into the future. And so this book coach allowed me to just kind of just ramble. And then from there, we started to dial it in, and then she started to dial it in. And then all of a sudden it started coming to life. So that's why I needed a book coach. That was the process. And I got to be honest, I started doubting myself. And she told me this. She goes, you know, when we start getting into more like final edits and final manuscripts and stuff like that, you're going to start doubting yourself. You're going to start saying, man, I hope this is good enough. Man, I hope I covered everything. Man, I hope that people get value from this. Like it's normal that you're going to run through that because you know, we know that once we print it, it's printed, right? It's not like it's a digital version. Now there will be a digital version available, but for the most part, we're printing, you know, these books, right? So it's in print. So the process was easier than if I was to sit down with my laptop and just start typing. But it was still hard. But to me, well worth it because this is the next move for Scott. And this brand, like that is the move that I want to go because it feels right inside of me, but it didn't feel right 2 years ago. Does that make sense?
It does. And I love that you said, does that make sense?
I know I had to do that.
So it's funny because, you know, a lot of people are like, oh, so did you physically type it up? The answer is no. But the thing that's funny, you said, who is this for, Scott? Mm-hmm. You said it's for anybody who feels stuck. Mm-hmm. And as you were talking, I literally am scrolling through, I don't think it's the final version, but it's one of the versions that I have in a PDF here. And as soon as you said that, I scrolled to the bottom of page 19. And literally, as you said, stuck, the word stuck popped out on the page. Mm. You said, my future was dulled. I felt pissed. I felt tired. And I felt completely stuck. Mm. And that was the take action moment that led to everything after that, correct?
Yeah. That was, and again, at the event, if you were at Brand Accelerator Live, then you're going to see this more or less relived because my presentation, it really is going to lead people through to how this even came to be. Right. And that was a huge moment. I mean, one of the moments, which I talked about not that long ago on the podcast, was the moment that I walked, or I came home from actually in the parking lot of my father's company, and my wife came up to me crying, and my mother had passed away. And so that was a huge shift in my mind of life. And I had 2 young kids at the time. I had a 2-month-old and a 3-year-old, and it just woke me up. But then for 2 more years, I still was working my butt off because I thought that's what I needed to be doing because I thought that's where my future was. But it wasn't. And that part there that you're reading, that was the time I was really frustrated, burnout, and I felt like I wasn't going to be able to continue. And I had to because I had a family to support, but I was going to be so unhappy, which, yeah, I felt stuck.
And it's funny because even I've heard you tell that story probably 50 times. Mm-hmm. And reading it on paper, I can actually hear you say it. Mm. And one of the things that I really think came through in this process is they did have you tell these stories multiple times.
Oh, yeah.
And you kind of get the best version of that versus you just sitting down and writing it or telling it on the podcast. And that comes back to the authority of the medium, right? Like when it's written in stone, it is the best version of that story. Mm. And it really communicates the message a lot more clearly than you and I do sitting here jibber jabbering back and forth on the podcast. Right. And you did something here that I think a lot of people needed, which is broke this basically into 2 parts, which is the pull your head out of your butt part, right? Like find all of the things that you have. And then how do we actually turn that into something that allows us to enable our lifestyle? Whether that is e-commerce, whether that is a blog, whether that is whatever the route that you choose to go. So it does give you that really nice, just laid out roadmap, if you will. And it's just one of those things where it's been an interesting process, I think, for you. And it's the same thing, I think, as people go through this, because this is not just like a read and put up on the shelf type of a book. This is like, you're actually having people do stuff as they go through this, correct? Like, you're going to be learning and pulling these same stories and experiences back into your own life as you read through this book, right?
Well, here's the deal, right? It's a take action book. So there's going to be action steps. All right. So there's also these little timeouts I have here, because I do that a lot. And it was funny when I was going through this with my book coach, I would say, all right, I'm going to call a timeout right now. Right. So then we made that part of the book, like these timeouts, like it's like a little side rant, right? Or a little side story to add to the story, which was that's kind of how I am. So I wanted this to be the type of book where I'm sitting down with you explaining all of this, but then I'm also pointing it over to you to say, now let's work on you, right? Let's take these lessons that I've been through and let's work on you. Let's uncover and let's really identify what it is you truly want, if you can have it. Like, there's a section in there about dreaming. Like, I mean, dreaming big. We always limit ourselves to what we think we can achieve instead of going outside of that on things that we just don't think we can, but we would love to have. And the truth is, you can have that if you really want it. And if it's really meaningful, because sometimes you'll say, well, I dreamt that and that's what I really want. But then you really dig into your why and it's not really what you want. There might be a different reason why you want it. But we figure all that stuff out. And yes, there are action steps. And this is a book I want you to be able to go back to again and again and again. Like, there's a book that I go back to, and I mean, there's a lot of them, actually. There's Essentialism, right? Like, there's that one. There's a great one that I go back to all the time, because it reminds me that I need to simplify. I need to strip down all to the basic stuff that really lights me up, not all the little stuff, right? So there's books that I want to go back to myself. That's what I want this book to be. It's yes, you can read it once and then you can get to work, but you're probably going to want to go back, because as you evolve, as your business evolves, there's different parts of the building stage or the monetization stage, right? You're not going to do it all in one clean swoop. Like, you're going to go back and continually work and build your business and learn from it. And you might then pivot into a new direction. Like, this book to me and the podcast over the past 2 years has pivoted towards more of brand building. Like, and what's crazy, Chris, is I was actually, I was talking to one of our attendees. Actually, they shot a video in the group, and they were talking about, like, once they seen that I was shifting my focus to brand building and off of just focusing on Amazon, they got even more interested, because they knew that Amazon was getting too competitive, and they didn't want to go down that road, because either they were burnt by Amazon or maybe competitors or whatever. And they were like, you caught my interest when you started doing that, because I feel like that is more future, right? It's more of like, that will never go away. And I was like, yes, that's exactly what I want. And this book is an extension of that. So anyway, this is like a pivot for me, in a sense, in a direction that I want to go, that's going to light me up. And I want that to be a lesson to you. If you're not feeling your business is lighting you up, or that you've started something and it's not lighting you up, you can pivot. It's totally possible. Not easy always, but it is possible.
Well, and that's one of the things you did intentionally with this book, right? Is you're giving people the skill set they need to pivot when they need to, right? And it's talking about, building the business of your dreams and doing those things. And if you're stuck, you're chained to that chain link fence, or you're chained to that desk, or you're chained to wherever, that's probably your first pivot. But I hate to break it to y'all, that's probably not going to be your last business, or your last thing that you try.
Yeah.
It might be, if it's the thing that you're absolutely passionate about, right? The only thing you've ever been passionate about in your life is fishing, and you start a fishing business. Great. But for most of us, it's a stepping stone to something else. And Scott, you mentioned a few minutes ago about coming back to this book over and over and over again. And I think one of the things that was done really well in the layout of this, and I want to give you props for this, and I want to give your team that worked on this book props for this, is those timeout sections that you mentioned. And you guys heard me say probably 15, 20 minutes ago that the only way I can learn stuff and really like plant stuff in my head is by writing it down, right? I have to take notes. And whether you read this book with a notepad next to you, or you take notes in the margins, another benefit of a physical book,
right?
These little timeout sections give you the opportunity and force you to do that. And I wanted to dive into one really fast, Scott, if we have time.
Yeah, go ahead.
It says, timeout, listen, I don't want this book to be all about me. This is really about you and your story as it unfolds. So let's pause for a second and talk about you. What have you done in your life that you've worked hard for? You might not have even known whether it was going to work, but you still did. Write that down. Maybe you put in work for 6 or 8 years to get a degree. Maybe you built a business. Maybe you climbed the ladder. The point is, you've definitely achieved things in your life already because you saw a prize at the end and decided to go after it. What's your prize here? What's the prize now? What is it going to take to reach it? Look at the past to remind yourself that you can do it, and look at your potential future to remind yourself why you should. This is the perfect example of why you need to be writing this stuff down, right? Like when you go to one of these sections in the book, jot those things down. What are the things that you've worked the hardest for in your life and why? And when you see those on paper, that then brings back to what Scott, you and I were talking about 15 minutes ago, which is like, what are the things that I have accomplished? What are the things I need to be giving myself credit for? What are the skills that I have that I'm not aware of?
Mm-hmm.
Those come out of reflection in these types of moments. And it can be really uncomfortable, but that's why it's in here, right? And you called a lot of those things out throughout the book. And I think that's something that a lot of people will only take away if they're reading it and doing the things that you're asking them to do when they go through the book.
Yeah, no, and that was extremely important. So yeah, and that was great that you pulled that out, because that, again, that's how I talk. That's how I am if I'm there with you in person. And I wanted the book to represent that same experience as best as possible, which I think it did.
It absolutely does. And that was what I was getting at earlier, where I said, it's kind of the best version of the story. I've heard you tell the story 50 times, but it's the most impactful way. And it draws the most out of the reader in that format. And it really is kind of like having you standing there saying, dude, how did I get here? Like, how did you get here? What about the path that you're on drove you to keep going through the training and the education, right? What has made you feel stuck in where you are right now? Like it's literally you asking the questions to the reader, which I think is really cool.
Mm-hmm.
And that was something that people really, really need to take out of this book, is when you see those little call outs. And I think they're just little gray boxes in the final version, right?
Yep.
And it's, right above, right below a chapter, right in the middle of a chapter, wherever it needs to be. Make sure, take 30 seconds, grab the pen, grab the piece of paper, and jot down the actual answers to those questions, just like you were having a conversation. And that's how you're going to enable yourself to actually get the most out of this. Scott, we could talk about this all day, but I had one other question that I wanted to ask you.
Sure.
This book is all about take action moments. And I know that your life has been full of take action moments. Now that you have had the opportunity, the requirement, if you will, in writing this book, to look back on those moments. So can you give everybody an example of maybe the one thing or the two take action moments that led you to where you are right now?
Yeah. Okay. Well, there's two that come to mind, and it's funny because there's one that's early on and then there's one that's later. And so the first one that comes to mind is that decision I had in my living room after I had worked, probably like a 10 or a 12-hour day, worked all week. And from there, I was just feeling burnout, and I was sitting down, and that's when my wife and I had that conversation. And that was when we decided to give photography a go, which is just crazy on how that even happened. And again, so then from there, we actually acted on that. And I didn't believe 100% that it was going to work, but I thought it might bring in some extra money that I wouldn't have to work 60 hours. I could work 40 hours, right? That was the idea. And then once that started to take off, that brought us into the photography world, which back then it wasn't even digital. Digital was just starting to come out. I think the biggest camera out there at the time was like a 3 megapixel. And then when the 6 came out, and everybody thought, wow, we got a 6 megapixel camera. So from there, that opened up the doors for me to learn Photoshop. And I have a book that's still sitting on my shelf here. It's about 3.5, 4 inches thick. It's called the Photoshop 6 Bible. And I bought that book for like $65, and I read it. And remember, I'm not a person that really likes to read books all that much. I like to listen to them more than I like to read, but I do have both. I always buy both, by the way. I buy a physical and an audio version of it. But that was a big one for me, because that then, if you look at the path and the timelines of everything, that opened up Photoshop. And then it opened up like launching my own online training stuff in Photoshop tutorials and all of that stuff. So that's a big one. there's a whole bunch of other ones that came, in between there or after that even. But the next one that comes to mind is the podcast. This podcast that's being aired right now almost didn't happen. Okay. I had an idea to do it. I'd actually tried launching 2 other podcasts, and they were just kind of like projects, like hobbies. Like one was in fitness and one was in marketing, because I love marketing so much, but it was too broad and I just lost interest. So I tried 2 podcasts and they didn't really do what I wanted, or I didn't get the fulfillment from them, whatever. And then I decided to maybe try something here because I was getting results on Amazon. So I was like, you know what, maybe I'll give it a shot. And then I started to think about it a little bit more. And then all of a sudden I started getting that self-doubt. And then my wife came in, as she always does, and says, you got to do it. Come on. People love to learn from you. You've already done it in the photography space. You should really do this. And so I finally hit record, and a good thing I did, because look, we just got done with Brand Accelerator Live. And look at everything that's happened, over 700 episodes, 14 plus million downloads, thousands of people all over the world. This book, all of that was because of the moment that I said, let me go ahead and click record and see what happens, right? Everything on the other end of that. And look, and here we are, book. Who would have thought a book, and called The Take Action Effect, right? So those are 2 big ones for me, but there's a lot of other ones, and they're throughout the book. They're all the way through the book. Chris, let me ask you, what's one big take action moment for you? I'm going to put you on the spot.
I guess it depends on the podcast.
Okay.
But did I say podcast?
You did say podcast.
I meant to say context.
There are some podcasts that you've been on. Which one did you like the best? No.
I was like, episode 119. I'm looking at the podcast, and I said podcast.
I've done
you
that.
Said podcast.
Yeah.
That was it was my podcast.
Yeah.
I think for me, honestly, was moving to Nevada.
Okay.
I ended up for a lot of, most people don't know like my whole backstory, but I graduated college. I went to Penn State, and I actually got a job in town as a marketing director, right? Fresh out of college.
Okay.
Now, love the company, love everybody that works there to this day. They really didn't need a marketing person, right? They've got like 5 clients in the entire world. They had 4 of them when I started, and we got the 5th one while I worked there. So I guess I did my job, but it wasn't really the thing. It was for a logistics company, which to this day, ironically, right, it's where I learned Incoterms. So I guess I took that out.
Okay, well, there you go. There you go.
But it was it was a decent paying full-time job, and it's got a little bit of the same thing you had with your dad's construction company. The owner was basically grooming me, for lack of a better term, to take over the business.
Okay,
and it just really wasn't something that excited me, and so I started looking for jobs just in the marketing world. And I mentioned earlier that I'm like a huge tech nerd, right? My first job was selling and installing home theater. My second job that paid my way through a lot of college was selling cell phones, right? So like anything in the tech sector really excited me. And I ended up landing an interview with a company in Reno, Nevada, as a web developer, of all things, which I can write enough HTML to build a website. I'm probably not who anybody should hire to be a web developer.
Okay.
And it was a part-time job, but it paid decently, and the cost of living was going to be less. So I decided to pack up everything and move across the country to work for this tech company. Turns out my boss at that tech company was Joel Bauer.
Mm-hmm.
So after, a few months of absolutely hating each other, we realized we had a lot more in common, and that's the reason that we hated each other. And that led to everything that he and I have done together, which directly led to everything that you and I have done together.
Mm.
So taking that one small leap has led to basically everything that I've done for the last 10 years.
Yeah. Yeah, no, and again, it's like, what if that never happened, right? Like, what if that never happened? Who knows? Right? Maybe life would be better. I don't know. But you know what I mean? Like, but there's that one thing, and then look at everything you learned through that moment, that decision that you decided to go all in and see what would happen, which I think is always just incredible. And I actually want to do more stories like that on the podcast, as far as like someone's take action moment or their take action path, to see exactly what happened when they made these actions. Now, not everything's great, right? Like in these actions. And there's two big ones that I know of that I actually, that I talk about. I talked about it at Brand Accelerator Live is, there's two of them. One of them was I bought a domain name for it was basically our photography, online business, and found out a year later that it was we were a trademark violation. So then I got a phone call and found out that I had to shut everything down within. Actually, they were pretty cool about it. They gave me a year to point everything over to the new domain, a new name, and then I had to file a trademark. So I learned a lot. But it was scary and I hated it because I thought everything was going great. And then all of a sudden my legs got kicked out from under me. The other one is once the online side of things started flowing for me, I didn't realize that it was doing as well until my accountant called me up and goes, hey, by the way, want to let you know, you better have about $20,000 more sitting in your account because that's what you owe the government. And I'm like, really? I thought I was just paying quarterly like I've always been. And he's like, no, but you've been making a lot more money. So because of that, I had to come up with 20 grand, which luckily I'm pretty good with my money. I went ahead and I started stashing some as I was making some just for a rainy day. Well, that rainy day came and it wiped out all my money and I had to start from zero again. So those are two that stick in my mind. But you're going to have those. What did I learn from both of those? Well, one, get a trademark and do a search. Number two, put money away for taxes as you're growing. Like pretty simple, right?
I can just hear your accountant right now having a heart attack.
Oh my gosh.
And Scott, for me, you say this in the book. You say it's not about never failing. It's about learning and growing from every action, right? And I think an example of that on my side comes directly on the heels of that same story that I was just telling, which is, I left that same job a few months before they were acquired by a massive tech company because we had what we thought was, a very secure contract with a bunch of people that was going to pay me 5 or 6 times what I was making there. And I said, I'm not worried about the little bit of equity I'll get if we sell. I'll just deal with it. And it turns out that about 3 weeks after that, they lost the contract, lost all of their funding. And, my world basically collapsed until we found out how we were going to replace 3 people's salaries. Right. And, we had all of these high hopes for this and we weren't doing anything crazy. We were planning on setting most of that money aside anyway, but you lose that safety net, you leap without a parachute and that can be dangerous. Now, luckily, we had learned from some of those actions previously, and we were able to correct that mistake very, very quickly. But looking back on those moments can teach you lessons now. Mm-hmm. And that's, I think, the biggest thing that I want people to take away from this book. And I think it's something you want a lot of people to take away from this book. Like I said, you said it's not about never failing. It's about learning and growing from each and every action. If failing is the experience, winning is the result. Mm-hmm. Every action you take has an outcome. And whether it's a win or a loss, it helps you learn. When you begin to take action towards your dream, you're going to make some wrong moves, guaranteed. So what? What result did you get? Why did it work? Why didn't it work? What did you actually learn? Before we can ask these questions and get the answers that move us forward, we have to actually have taken an action. When you try something new, however small, you get to see what happens. Ask those questions, and then you get a result. Every small victory, every small defeat is actually fuel for the engine driving you towards your dream. And that, I think, is the biggest thing that people need to take away from this, is that this book actually gives you a lot of the tools to extract both the victories and the defeats from your own life. Like Scott and I were just doing kind of here on the fly. Yeah. And then apply that to where you want to go so that you can do the quote unquote real business stuff. Right, Scott, you and I have been talking about this a lot recently. Business isn't hard. You just got to do more of what works and less of what doesn't, right? It gives you the tools to actually do both of those things simultaneously. What hasn't worked in the past and why? Okay, how can we make that work now? And then what did work? How can we make that work even better? Yeah. And this book, I think, gives everybody the tools to be able to do that in their own lives and in their businesses. Yeah, no, I agree. And I mean, we could keep going, like you said, for days on this. I love talking about that and about this concept, but also about, like, to me, the core pillars of building a business. And everything is outlined in the book. If you guys want to grab a physical copy of the book, you can head over to takeactioneffect.com. Again, that's takeactioneffect.com.
.com. It's crazy that I'm even saying that, by the way, guys, because I bought that domain name probably around 8 months ago after we decided on the name. It's been sitting there, and I've been wanting to say that domain on the podcast for a very long time. And it's finally time. So if you guys are interested in checking it out, supporting the book, because the way that I feel you're going to support the book is by getting it and actually taking action, and then creating these stories that I can hear of from you, from actually applying this stuff, but then changing your life. And one of the main reasons, Chris, why I wanted to do this also was because I've received tons of stories already. I have a whole wall that's dedicated to, stories. And there's a lot of people that were at Brand Accelerator Live, and there's some videos that they already posted in the group and everything. And it's just, to me, it's so rewarding and gratifying to hear how a shift, just one small shift, sends another person on a path to freedom. And that's really what I want to do here. So I would love it if you would apply this to your own life and then share it with someone that you care about. Like, to me, that's what it is for me. And like I said, this is not a book that is going to bring in, hundreds of thousands of dollars in revenue because of a book sale. If anyone knows anything about book sales, that's not how it works. Okay. But I am looking to spread the word about the book, about my message, about the podcast, about how I can help more people. And yes, there are ways that I can work with people, whether it's in a group setting, whether it's with a training, whatever. But the start of it is always building the relationship, a deeper connection with a person, a human being. And that's who's reading this book. So Chris, I just want to be very, very clear on that. That is the purpose for me. And that's what I want from this book. So anything else, Chris, you want to go do here before we wrap this thing up?
No, I think we nailed it, brother. I think the last question I had here for you was that take action moment. And I think for people to sit down, even if you don't have your hands on the physical copy of the book yet, sit down and just jot down one moment that led you to where you are. And that will start you down this path. And then obviously go to takeactioneffect.com, grab your copy of the book, and get the rest of the stuff that you need to be jotting down to figure this stuff out. Because what you're really doing in this book, Scott, is you're helping people work on themselves and on their businesses. And it's something that everybody needs. And most people aren't willing to sit in a room or sit through a webinar and listen to. But in the book format, they can do it in the comfort of their own home. And they get all of the benefits of it without having to feel uncomfortable, because it's just you talking to them via the book and a pencil and a pad of paper, which I think is a great way of going about it.
Yeah. And the other thing I would say too, guys, if you do grab the book, do me a favor on social media, whether it's Instagram, whether it's Facebook, Twitter, whatever, #TakeActionMoment. #TakeActionMoment. Do that. I'm going to be searching that hashtag every week, and I will be reaching out to everyone that posts a picture of themselves with the book. And tell me a little bit about your take action moment that has done something for you in your life that if you hadn't done that, life would be different. So I would love to hear from you on social as well. And I'd love to see you with a copy of that in your hands. So that's it. That's all I got here on this episode. Chris, thank you so much for coming on and digging in a little bit deeper with a little bit of behind the scenes. And let's wrap this up the way that we always do. You ready, Chris?
I am.
All right, guys. As always, remember, I'm here for you. I believe in you, and I am rooting for you. But you have to. Come on, say it with me. Say it loud. Say it proud. Chris is going to say it on the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. Take action. Have an awesome, amazing day, and I'll see you right back here on the next episode.